Hello everyone! In this video, we're going to discuss the cooperative principle and Grice's maxims. We are Iris Fajardo, Rafael Fariñas, and Carolina Montero. To begin with the cooperative principle, we should check what Paul Grice proposed. Make your conversational contribution such as is required, at the stage at which it occurs, by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you are engaged. According to what we just read, the cooperative principle states that people must say appropriate things according to the conversation they're having. In addition, this principle describes the rules in order to have logical and effective conversations. We will mention more of this later. The cooperative principle is based on pragmatics. So now you're probably asking what pragmatics is. Well, pragmatics is the study of the linguistic communication in context. This means that according to the context and the conversation, the meaning of the utterances may vary. Why do we say that the cooperative principle is based on pragmatics? Both refer to the different meanings a same statement can have in two different situations. Also, that appropriate things should be said in the appropriate conversations in order to make sense in the communicative event. Make your conversational contribution such as is required. This was mentioned before when we described the cooperative principle, but how speakers are supposed to know what is required or not for them to mention in their discourse. This is where Grice's maxims appear. Grice's maxims. We have the maxims of quantity, make your contributions as informative as required, do not make your contribution more informative than is required. The maxims of quality, do not say what you believe to be false, and do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. The maxim of relation, be relevant, and the maxims of manner, avoid obscurity of expression, avoid ambiguity, be brief, and be orderly.
We have that Grice defines 4 maxims and a total of 9 concrete maxims or guidelines. These maxims are not standalone, and speakers can fulfill more than one when they participate in communicative events. Let's illustrate how with some examples. Let's imagine a man is driving very fast, and some kilometers ahead, a police officer stops him. If the police officer who stopped him asks him his name, the man should stick to stating his name according to the first maxim of quantity and the maxim of relation. My name is John Smith. Anything more than that, like preceding his name by a title like doctor, sergeant, or major, would be in direct opposition with the second maxim of quantity and the maxim of relation itself. What's more, he could just say John Smith, following the third maxim of manner, since the question posed before provided context enough for the brief utterance to be understood. If asked about what he did that morning before taking the highway, the man should answer, I woke up, had breakfast, read the paper, and then drove to the grocery store, again following the maxim of relation, maxims of manner, and quantity. Come the moment when the police officer asks why the man was speeding, John Smith should answer then and only then, because my wife called me, she's going into labor. It is the reason for his actions and it is the pertinent answer to the question. Even though it is an urgent situation, the context dictated that he wait for the precise moment to explain himself. Doing it before could have led to the officer to believe he was lying, violating maxims of quantity to avoid getting a ticket. But what happens if, on the contrary, people don't follow the guidelines of the cooperative principle? People do this all the time and they are still able to understand each other because these violations represent conventional implicatures, messages that might have an underlying meaning but are still easy to decode. However, misunderstandings are bound to happen when conversational implicatures occur, which are the instances in which a speaker violates a maxim but the hearer doesn't always understand that it is being done on purpose. Most of these incidents are influenced by contextual and cultural variations, as we saw before with John Smith and the police officer.
According to Grice, there are 4 main ways in which people can depart from his maxims and bring about different implicatures to conversation. Number 1. quietly and unostentatiously violating a maxim, which involves a straightforward breaking of the rules, meaning that you do the opposite of what the maxim states. Using the same example of John Smith speeding on the highway, we have that he could have broken the first maxim of quality by calling himself a different name. For instance, Peter Jones. By purposefully lying about his identity, John is in direct violation of Grice's maxims. Number 2. Overtly opting out of a maxim, which refers to a situation in which you clearly state that you will break a rule, and in some cases to safeguard the information you are relying. In a scenario where John is a federal agent, for example, and the police officer asks about his whereabouts before taking the highway, John might answer, "I'm afraid I can't tell you, it's classified information," explicitly saying that he will opt out of the first maxim of quantity, which is necessary to preserve the secrecy of information. Number 3. When one must choose out of 2 or more maxims to be fulfilled during an utterance, one is inevitably coping with a clash between maxims. Supposing John was having a sudden panic attack and that's why he was speeding, the police officer could receive an answer along the lines of, "I just couldn't stop," or "I had to keep going." Neither of these answers are informative enough, failing to comply with maxims of quantity and relation. But John is choosing to uphold the first maxim of quality above others to tell the truth as it comes out in his state of emotional shock. Number 4. Finally, flouting a maxim to exploit it is an intentional violation by the speaker that he or she expects the listener will understand. So the use of rhetoric devices like irony, metaphors, tautologies, and so on falls under this category. A speaker can flout each maxim to convey different meanings. John can flout the maxims of quantity and relation by answering, "Well, it is a beautiful sunny day and it would be a sin not to hit the road," to express that he just felt like speeding but not saying it so explicitly. The police officer could ask, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And John could answer flouting the maxim of manner with, "Time is the longest distance between 2 places." In using a metaphor, John is being obscure in his expression to avoid answering the question. John could also be too informative, too prolix, or too ambiguous on purpose to avoid getting a ticket, which would most likely result in the officer getting frustrated and perhaps even arresting him. It is important to keep in mind the cultural and contextual variations at all times to know whether it is appropriate or not to use one of these mechanisms in conversation. It is advised to stick to Grice's maxims when engaged in conversation to avoid misunderstandings. But if you're familiar with the interlocutor and the context allows it, then you might resort to play with what you say in order to convey different meanings. We hope you will keep these guidelines in mind the next time you talk to someone. Thank you for watching!